You might not think left-handers have much to complain about, but you'd be wrong. Though I'm not one myself, I'm here to fly the flag for and air the grievances of lefties from around the world. The first two on this list is one messy business. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 struggles all left-handed people know to be true. 25. Smudging. No matter how neatly you write as a left-handed person, you can't get away from one thing, and that's smudging. It's all because of the push and pull effect, by which I mean the different ways in which lefties and righties handle their pens. A right-handed person has an easy time when they write, at least in languages like English, because they pull the pen away from the ink with the left to right direction. With left-handers, you're going left to right, but you're pushing, not pulling. So inevitably, your hand is going to smudge the ink you just wrote with. There isn't much you can do about this, except for angling your paper differently or cramping your hand to try to avoid the dreaded smudge. Or writing in Hebrew. That's right to left, so I know your struggle, lefties, because Hebrew, I have to write right to left, so I then smudge everything, so yeah. 24. Scissors. If you're a lefty watching this video, then you'll know all about the frustration and pain using scissors. The design of scissors looks simple. However, it doesn't work for everyone. They aren't so handy for those who use their left side due to the handles and the fact that the all-important top blades are, well, on the right. A left-handed person trying to use right-handed scissors is gonna have an awkward time, pushing the blades apart rather than together. Sure, left-handed scissors are available, but chances are, if you need to borrow some, well, they'll likely be a right-handed pair. This simple, yet annoying fact really cuts deep. Luckily, these ones from IKEA, I believe, are ambidextrous, so go with these. 23. Can openers. Opening a can of soup takes on a dangerous meaning when you're left-handed. Unless you have an opener which is designed for lefties, that soup is going to slosh everywhere. By turning the blades and holding the handle the wrong way around, well, you risk straining your wrist. The good news is you can buy can openers that both left-handers and right-handers are able to use. Hey, maybe a righty will be stuck using your lefted can opener one day, and then, well, they'll just know how you feel. 22. Mouse placement. Another simple thing which causes major problems for left-handed people is a computer mouse. Mice are everywhere, from offices to people's homes, but many of them are aimed at, well, right-handed people. So lefties find themselves having to drag, click, squeeze, and scroll with something that's going to aggravate their muscles. To make things even more irritating, left-handed mice can be more expensive. Nothing like being punished for being born a certain way to boost your confidence, right? 21. Teaching trouble. It's kind of a thing of the past now. However, back in the day, left-handed people were treated as unnatural. Can you believe teachers used to force lefties to write with their right hand? Not only is that ridiculous, it also leads to psychological issues. Your brain needs to communicate fast with different parts of your body, and if you naturally use the left hand, well, then this is where your writing impulse will go. Trying to go right only causes confusion. It must have been a nightmare for someone learning to write for the first time. 20. Sinister connections. Being left-handed doesn't just mean regular tasks are challenging. You also suffer from negativity based on old-fashioned ideas about lefties. Believe it or not, left-handers are seen as sinister. And by sinister, I literally mean sinister. You see, the word itself started out as ancient Latin for left. Yes, you're not just left-handed, you're sinister-handed. Sadly, the right hand has always had an advantage over the left when it comes to superstition and mythology. The Prince of Darkness himself, otherwise known as the Devil, is said to be a lefty. It wasn't until the early 20th century that attitudes began to change. 19. Baseball gloves. Sometimes left-handed students can't take part in sports. This is due to items such as baseball gloves being aimed at right-handed throwers. People who want to pitch with the left and catch with the right are not well catered for. Of course, that hasn't stopped some of the greatest players in the game's history from breaking through. Left-handed baseball players are called southpaws, and they include legendary figures like Whitey Ford, Sandy Koufax, and arguably the most famous player of all time, Babe Ruth. That is encouraging news. But I'm wondering about all the potential baseball players who never got their shot thanks to a lack of suitable equipment. 18. Cultural bias. Imagine being worried about using your left hand in public. That's the situation for young people and adults in certain cultures around the world. While acceptance of lefties in society has been a thing for approximately a century, the bias and prejudice still exists in specific communities. For example, there's a tradition in India and Pakistan of not eating with your left hand, which is considered unclean. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, they insisted on your left hand being used for toilet business and not the right. The strict rules and regs are dying out, though it's best to watch where you put your hand if you travel to one of these countries. 17. Problem solving. For lefties, being left-handed is a way of life. Yet for some, it's a problem to be solved. Understanding how human neurology works is a fairly recent development, meaning there's a lack of empathy for people whose brains are wired to go left rather than right. This leads to an authoritarian approach where people are urged to use their right hand for daily tasks. The authority figures who do this aren't evil, they are just totally ignorant and misguided. You wouldn't dream of trying to correct someone who is right-handed so that they would write with their left hand, so it's equally unacceptable to do that with lefties. 16. Left leadership. There are some remarkable left-handed people out there, from Barack Obama to Paul McCartney. It's led some to wonder whether there's something powerful about being a lefty, and that left-handedness leads to great things. Is it true that leaders and pioneering figures are more likely to go left? Well, unfortunately not, though it's great to look at these individuals and know that while they struggled as left-handers, ultimately they triumphed and became world famous. 15. Movies and lectures. Have you ever felt restless and uncomfortable in a movie theater or lecture hall? Uncomfortable seating is a big deal, even in the 21st century. And the problem gets worse if you're left-handed. In a movie theater, you have a whole issue with cup holders, forcing you to grab some refreshment with your non-dominant hand. That's a potential spillage hazard right there. The classroom is also a headache for lefty students who may have to do a contortionist routine so they can write on the correct side of the desk. 14. Lefty stereotypes. Just how different are left-handed people from us right-handed people? There's a theory that lefties are better suited for creative jobs like artists. It's a vague idea that isn't supported by any official findings, but you can see how people jump to this conclusion. Look at how scientists view the left and right side of the brain, for instance. The left side is more logical, and the right is more creative. Because lefties are thought to rely on the right side of their brain, and vice versa, a link was made between being left-handed and artistic qualities, like being eccentric or emotional about stuff. Again, I should stress that this is just a theory and not supported by experts. 13. Left-handed villains. Here's a question for you movie and TV lovers. What's the connection between Thanos and Kaiser Soze? Okay, well obviously they're villains, but there's something else. They're also left-handed. Whether this is intentional or just a coincidence, the fact remains they're southpaws and represent a stereotype where lefties are the bad guys. Depending on how you feel, you either love that you're in the same group as these cool characters, or you hate that they've reinforced an old cliche. 12. Handshakes. When you go in for a handshake and you're right-handed, do you expect the person you're meeting to be left-handed? In most cases, you don't. It looks strange that the individual doesn't use the hand you think they will, and believe me, this worry is felt by lefties also. It can lead to them adjusting their behavior so they'll shake with the right, even if it isn't their natural instinct. I mean, think about it. Shaking someone's right hand with your left is tough. You're better off going with a fist bump or high five, and even then, you're probably going to have problems. 11. Filling in information. You're more likely to fill in a form or make payment online these days, meaning left-handed people don't struggle too much with paperwork or old-school banking. However, back in the old days, things were different. A form would always have to be filled in using a pen, and the same thing applied to checkbooks. Remember those? Yeah, I'm sure some of our viewers are going to feel pretty old right now. When you're completing either of these tasks as a left-handed person, you'll notice that the layouts of forms and books can be challenging. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, the ink is probably going to get smudged. 10. Rebellious lefties. Here's an interesting fact. Left-handedness is seen as a symbol of rebelliousness. In other words, if you don't use your right hand, you're not following the rules, as set out in various cultures and religions. Thankfully, this outdated idea isn't popular anymore, but hey, that doesn't mean the damage hasn't been done to successive generations. These individuals were made to feel that they didn't fit in at school, with serious consequences for their development growing up. It's really just something they do naturally. They're not trying to rebel. 9. Clumsiness. The ancient Chinese philosopher Confucius caused confusion in his country by accidentally labeling left-handed people as a problem. He didn't single out lefties himself, but people interpreted his ideas in weird and cruel ways. For example, if you didn't use your right hand, you had to be made to use it. Otherwise, you'd be disrespecting the code. This led to some pretty dramatic cases of disciplining lefties. Can you believe restraints were used to stop people writing with their left hand? The legacy of these punishments can be felt today. As reported in 2023, there is a 7% gap between China's lefty population and the global average. Worldwide, it's 10%, while in China, it's less than 3%. 8. Gamers. Left-handed gamers have sore wrists. I mean, all gamers have sore wrists at one time or another, but lefties have it worse because controllers and gaming menus tend to favor right-handed players. Buttons and touchscreens are a struggle for lefty gamers who need to be quick-witted and intuitive so they can win their games. That's a problem if you're constantly having to adjust how your hand wants to move. One good thing is that the typical QWERTY keyboard isn't biased against left-handers. Plus, there are alternatives should you want to be more comfortable. 7. Left-handed deaths. You may have heard that lefties die sooner. Well, I'm happy to report that that story is garbage. The mistake had been hanging around since the 80s, with experts stating a higher number of left-handed people died young. This data turned out to be seriously flawed, because the number crunchers forgot that many older people trained themselves to stop using their left hands. So a whole bunch of them were assumed to be righties, when in fact, they were ex-lefties. It's kooky to talk state if you're heading for an early grave due to your hand preference. 6. Parenting myth. You became left-handed because of how you were raised? Pfft, give me a break. This is another misconception that lefties have had to struggle with over the years. There was a time when people who should have known better, like doctors, connected being left-handed to being bad. If you'd experienced a trauma or been brought up poorly by your parents, that might explain why you're a southpaw. Yeah, I smell bull. There's nothing wrong with left-handedness at all. It's hardwired in your DNA, and you should celebrate it. My father was left-handed. 5. Geniuses. Another thing left-handers have thrown at them is the idea that they're special. After all, Leonardo da Vinci and Nikola Tesla were lefties, which for some suggests a crazy connection between brain power and hand movement. People also say that Albert Einstein was left-handed, and he's one of the greatest geniuses of all time, so it must be true, right? Wrong. Cool though it sounds, this idea just isn't backed up by evidence. 4. Math. How weird is it to say that left-handers can't do math properly? They even did a big study on that in 2017 where, surprise, surprise, the theory was revealed as a lie. The way you use your hand doesn't determine your mathematical skill level. Sorry to break it to you. In fact, it's difficult to see why people ever thought that to begin with. I guess you could argue that lefties are more distracted because they're concentrating on using right-handed calculators or whatever, but even so, you can't make a sweeping statement like that. Like left-handed people struggle with math without knowing what you're talking about. 3. Breast cancer. A worrying story that's been put out there lately is that left-handed women are more likely to develop breast cancer. Is this true? It sounds wild. However, there is a limited amount of scientific data to back up the claim. I would stress, again, that the data is limited. In 2007, a small study was published showing that left-handers could possibly be at risk. Women exposed to certain hormones in their womb, especially after menopause, were found to be potentially susceptible to cancer. And I say potentially because, again, there is no definitive proof. 2. Witchcraft. Burn the witch! The left-handed witch, that is. One factor that has affected the lives of lefties through the ages is the connection between left-handedness and witchcraft. Wait, does that mean if you're left-handed, you might be a witch? Of course not. It's just what people used to believe in the olden days. Back then, if you were involved in a witch trial and you did something like scratch your nose with your left hand, well, that could be enough to find you guilty. I am exaggerating a little bit there, but remember, being a lefty wasn't really accepted until the 20th century, hundreds of years on from the times of the witch trials. 1. Religion. Religions can be very different, and people argue over which one's the best. That said, there are things you notice that they do share, and one of those is the distrust of left-handers. The right hand represents goodness, while the left spells bad news. Let's take the example of being a Christian. In Christianity, where did Jesus sit? At the right hand of God, of course. There were also the writings of Maimonides, a rabbi and philosopher who lived in the Middle Ages. He made it known that the Kohanim, essentially Jewish priests, were not allowed to be left-handed. No wonder lefties have had to struggle so much across history. Now, it's time to take our final left turn, because I have one more question for you before I go. Which band released the track titled Left Hand in 1986? Was it A, Pearl Jam, B, The Killers, C, Elvis Costello and the Attractions, or D, Crowded House? Let me know your answers in the comments, and if you want to learn more crazy stuff about left-handed people, then I have a bunch of facts ready to go right here, left here. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, do all that fun stuff, and I'll catch you next time. I'm gonna salute with my left hand this time.